Welcome back. You're still watching The Globe. Now, the National Black Business Caucus has received a huge amount of complaints around the current electricity crisis. The NBBC seeks to empower black-owned businesses in South Africa to participate in the mainstream economy of the country. The NBBC is concerned that a number of small businesses are facing foreclosure as a result of the consistent lack of sustainable electricity. For a little bit more on this, we're now joined in studio by Volchere Kgekwane, who's the CEO of the National Black Business Caucus of the Black Business Council. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
It must be really difficult for businesses out there, and I suspect the smaller the business, the greater the danger.
Yes. What we experience is, so we've got people like those who've got a coffee shop, for example, who stock up in bulk, trying to stock in bulk so they can reduce their costs. But then you have these 4 hours a day of power, and you got random load shedding. You cannot plan for it. So when you cannot plan for load shedding, what happens is you lose a lot of stock. We've got big business as well. For example, Astral, who owns Mondi Chicken and Festive Chicken. As an example, I mean, they run a lot of fridges in their sites, right? Because obviously they slaughter that many chicks, north of 100,000 chicks, at a time. So they need to keep them in those fridges during the processing periods, right? When they're processing it. And even with their backup generators that they've invested so much on, it's inadequate if you're going to go to 4 hours of power in a 24-hour, well, in an 8-hour cycle where the company is working. And, in a day you have 6 hours of non-functional electricity not being there, being absent. So it's hard for big business, but for small business it's even worse.
I mean, I was just hearing today how Undertakers are in dire straits because we forget that they receive these bodies, people's loved ones, and they need to keep them cold.
Yes.
And without power, that becomes a challenge.
Exactly. I mean, this situation, this incompetence is costing the country a lot. And on the ground where we are, where we see the actual small businesses, the employees of those small businesses, what they go through, because a business like an Undertaker, for example, we have a few of them also on our database who are struggling just to keep doing the job that they promised that they were going to do for those who are in a very, very horrible emotional situation at the time. But you cannot maintain it because the country is not supplying. The supply of energy is incompetent and not supplying the right amount of energy that is required for the country to function economically.
You've used the word incompetence twice now. Is that what you think this is?
It's incompetence. By profession, I'm a marketing executive. You work on targets. You plan for what you're going to do. You don't run things randomly and always have an excuse. In the corporate sector, you do not have a chance to always be telling excuse after excuse after excuse and expecting people to understand that, oh no, it's not my fault as an executive, it's not my fault as a leader, it's someone else's fault somewhere, but I don't know where the fault is. Let's see but in the meantime, all of you must just suffer while I try to work out what I am going to do with the incompetence that I'm facing right now. So the incompetence could be at engineering level, it could be at leadership level, it could be political interference that's causing that incompetence. In South Africa, we like to label things as corruption, but corruption, is one of the problems. But I think the main problem here is incompetence. An engineer knows that they must have 10% that they can use on downtime. That whatever they are running must be 90% online. Now, we are not having that. That's not what's happening in South Africa. Somehow the engineering's gone wrong, or the leadership is telling the engineers not to follow whatever the principles that they've been trained to work under. And that to me is incompetence, because we are now diving into what is really a third world country, where we're going to now have, they're talking about maybe possibly going to 8, load shedding stage 8. And what does that mean? That means 8 hours a day with no power. That's a whole working day. How is the country going to survive? How's the economy going to function?
Black business generally were late entrants because of the way apartheid worked. Mm-hmm. Does that make them more vulnerable to shocks like this?
Yes, because there are so many challenges facing black business in South Africa, which is ironic because it's a black country, but the black people are the one on the outskirts asking to participate in the mainstream economy, which to me is very strange because this mainstream economy we are all talking about is black consumers. You know, that's what it's composed of. But there are so many challenges that are facing black business on a daily basis. Lack of access to funding, inadequate funding from government, DFIs that operate like commercial banks. You got all these different things that you need to navigate through. You're expected to be formal and experienced as a small business when you're coming into an environment where, like you just said, you are late. You are a late starter in the race, you know. And then when you just try to get on your feet, then you don't have energy. We are told every day that the president has gone overseas and got these great investments that are coming in. It does not matter how much those people love the president or not, or love the country or not. If those people are investors, if they are institutional investors, they will not function in an environment without sustainable energy. They will all leave again because that investment will fall awry.
Black businesses, how can they be supported? Could it be a question of giving them assistance and getting generators, something to stop the gap?
We cannot go and justify this term we've called load shedding. We're the only country in this world that has a term for this incompetence. They call it load shedding, okay? We cannot go and justify this by subsidizing the incompetence of Eskom by buying generators, costing the government more money when this should just be fixed. We've spent billions now on these IPPs who are running an energy source that everybody knows globally that it can never replace coal, definitely cannot replace nuclear, okay? So we are focusing on the wrong things. You got a CEO of an entity literally promoting an opposition. The IPPs are oppositions to Eskom. They should be competing with Eskom for energy generation and supply. But Eskom wants a competitor to subsidize them, charge them an arm and a leg for electricity they cannot sell. So it's dysfunctional. The whole system, you cannot buy a banana for 8 rands and sell it for 2 rands to the market. You're not running a business there. You're passing time and losing money, you know? So to me, the incompetence is amazing, and I don't know why it cannot be arrested. We don't need to buy small businesses generators. We need Eskom to function.
Yeah, and energy prices are going up literally in a few months' time by 30%. So whatever headaches we've got now, they're going to be exacerbated. Does that mean we are going to see a number of black businesses folding?
Yes. If this continues, if a company the size of Astral Foods cannot sustain, what does that mean? That means in the end, such a large company needs to start cutting costs, which labor force starts to be reduced. I run a foundation in Tembisa called Bukamso Foundation. We feed 750 families per week who used to be working are not now because before it was blamed on COVID. And then the rolling blackouts come. So when are businesses going to stabilize? So what they do is they shed the cost, and when they shed the cost, people sit home, families get under stress, they cannot feed themselves, children are malnutrition. When malnutrition children, we lost 3,000 babies or children under the age of 6. These statistics, I saw them actually on an SABC show today when we were talking about malnutrition, okay? And you cannot allow that to be happening and become a norm. The problem in South Africa is when somebody is incompetent or when an entity is not functional or when something is done wrong, we just accept it and it becomes a norm. We cannot do that. Eskom must function.
How does the private sector intervene? Because sometimes you've got to get to a point where you say, we can't just put up our hands and do nothing. Is there anything black business, private sector in general, can do?
Yeah, So this is not private sector's duty. This is a state-owned entity.
Yes, indeed, but they're failing.
So what's happened in other countries like Australia, Australia's got multiple suppliers of energy. You can choose which one to utilize, right? But here, the licensing and the red tape around you supplying directly to which grid, whose grid, because the grid is Eskom's grid, traditionally speaking, right? So it does not matter what, even if somebody was to start producing some other forms of energy that can help to sustain when Eskom is down, they still have to utilize Eskom's grid. So the competitiveness there becomes problematic. So everything at the moment goes through Eskom. So I don't know what corporate sector is expected to do because they are victims of this. And this, what I call incompetence, is a drive to devaluing Eskom as an entity. And maybe somebody's going to buy it like the shenanigans we saw with SAA, okay? And many other SOEs that have been sold off from time to time, and we find that there is no sustainability anymore. That's why we're deindustrialized now. All of our minerals are leaving the country, going to other countries to make those countries' children have proper nutrition, while we are the ones who are just digging up our resources and handing it over, and then buying it back.
We've run out of time, but I don't understand. We've got some of the best universities in the world, some of the best engineers in the world, some of the greatest minds in the world. How is it we can't get this thing done? Who's getting in our way?
Politics. And the politics of South Africa are not politics like any other country where people are expected to lead for the betterment of the country. The politics in South Africa is about who's going to lead so they have access to the piggy bank, so they can get access to that and share it with whoever they want to share it with. And that's the fundamental problem. Most of the people in parliament are not people who you can say understand what needs to be done, or I dare say, a lot of them I don't think even care what needs to be done as long as they're getting something. We need to put people in power whose sole interest is to drive excellence and deliver on everything they say they're going to do. And then we need to hold those people accountable. This is spoken a lot about holding people accountable. But the issue is, who's going to hold them accountable? We as a people, a lot of the masses don't have access to ways of holding people accountable unless they go to the votes or on the periodic voting period, right? So we need to find people who are patriots, who want to see the country thrive, you know? Like how the rugby team is operating. They want to see themselves thrive and be the best at something in the world. Our soccer team, the Banyana are doing amazing things. But it's not because they were voted in to be there. It is because they went out onto that field hoping to be the best at what they do. We don't have that in politics in South Africa.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. I wish we could talk for longer, but thank you so much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us about this epic problem and how it's affecting our black businesses in particular. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.